Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. Welcome back. It's another fantastic episode of the Freight 360 podcast. We're up to 266. And if you're brand new, please make sure to check out all of our other content. The website, freight360.net, is full of a searchable library. You've got blogs, you've got short-length YouTube educational videos, full-length podcasts, downloadable content, and you can even subscribe to our email newsletter, which goes out every Tuesday and Thursday. You can ask us a question, contact us, and check out the Freight Broker Basics course for a full-length educational option. Ben, what's going on in Florida today, man?
Doing well. Transitioning into fall. Weather's getting a little bit nice. Storms at least missed us, so no complaints.
It's definitely fall up here in Western New York. So leaves are falling. It's getting cold. It's hoodie season. It's 45 degrees right now, but that's what we deal with here in the Northeast.
My daughter's in kindergarten and she was learning about fall at school, and they had fall celebration. She has her first field trip next week to a pumpkin farm, and
nice.
We're walking around and she's like, "Dad, when do the leaves change? When's fall?" I'm like, "Well, it's fall now, honey." She's like, "But it isn't. All the leaves are green. When do they turn brown and fall off?" And I'm like, "Well, honey, they don't really turn brown here and fall off because our weather doesn't change that much." She looked at me so confused and was like, "Okay, well, when can we travel to another country so that I can see fall? Because I really want to see these leaves change."
Bring it up to Buffalo, man. Go to Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Speaking of Buffalo, I'm going to have to do a really quick change my background here. See if this will work. Does that work?
It did.
All right. So the Bills got a nice little Monday night football win. It wasn't the prettiest, but it was a win. So 23-20 Bills over the Jets Monday night. But Aaron Rodgers, man, throwing a Hail Mary at halftime. I don't know if you guys saw that. Fourth of his career. Not something you want to see as a Bills fan when you're watching the game, but they got away with the win. And yeah. Also, Devontae Adams, the Jets just picked up this week, and the Bills picked up Amari Cooper. So big NFL moves there. I think the Steelers are playing the Jets in primetime this coming weekend.
They are. Russell Wilson is slated
I
to
know.
start.
I heard that. Russ.
So, yeah.
So you got, what do you guys, 4-1 or 3-2?
3-2.
Okay.
Yep.
Baseball playoffs moving real fast here. It's Yankees looking really good right now against Cleveland, and you got the Mets. So two New York teams in the championship or in the semifinals, if you want to call it that. But you got the Dodgers and the Mets. I think it's going to be Dodgers, Yankees. I think the Yankees take the whole thing. So the United States, the Grand Prix in Austin this coming weekend too. It's been if you're an F1 person, they've been off for about a month, but we don't really get a lot of races on the Western Hemisphere. But we had Miami earlier this year down by you, and then it's in Austin this weekend. So for all you motorsports fans, check out the Grand Prix on Sunday.
Super cool, by the way. It's the only racing event I've ever actually seen. I saw the F1 race in Indy at the Indy 500 track, the Brickyard. I was probably 18 or 19, so this had to be 20 some years ago, but it was one of the coolest sporting events I'd ever been to, especially for a first time at one. I mean, the speed, the sound, the power, and watching it on TV is nowhere close to seeing it in person.
Yeah,
I've gotten to see playoff games for NFL, NHL, baseball, but and NBA, but seeing an F1 race up close is it's the farthest thing from what it looks like on TV is the only thing I can say.
Crazy. Anything else in sports? Got some news to get into here.
No, jump into it.
So I don't know if you saw this, but this week they had the inaugural Freight Fraud Awareness Day. So Genlogs was one of I think it was Genlogs verified carrier and truck stop. But basically freight fraud's been a big thing. We're like in year 3 of it being an intense issue in our industry, but there's officially a freight fraud awareness day that would happen this week. Genlogs they're doing some good stuff, and we're going to have them on the show here, I think, in the next couple weeks, right?
Yep.
So stay tuned for that. Other news, aftermath of like the hurricanes, the port strikes. It doesn't feel like the freight market was disrupted or impacted as much as I would have expected with 2 hurricanes and port strikes. Have you seen anything different?
I have not. I haven't
Kind of like
seen
your
it on the
standard
ground.
hurricane stuff, like FEMA and whatnot going into Florida, but outside of that, and North Carolina, obviously. But yeah.
And also, I think that has a lot to do with the market being pretty loose. Like there's quite a bit of capacity in it. So I think these events are getting absorbed without a huge significant impact on the rest of the country or even kind of the region in some areas. But again, anecdotal, but I haven't seen much or heard from any of our customers or people that I've talked to that they're getting much of an impact on capacity related to it.
Wild, man. Wild. Well, cool. Let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about, so last week we talked about, what do you got?
One news article I wanted to point out, this was in Freight Caviar. It was from Arrive Logistics, and they did a 2025
prediction?
Freight forecast. Again, I always like to share some positive news. But here's what the forecast indicates. I'll just give you the punchlines. Van spot rates will reach a peak year-over-year growth rate of 12% Q3 2025. Van contract rates will peak year-over-year growth rate 5%. Reefer spot rates 12% growth. Reefer contract 4% growth. So I mean, they are predicting moving back to a very favorable market, I think, for carriers as well as the whole industry, seeing it come back up. And I think the big takeaway, I read through the whole thing, was mostly like they don't see one significant event creating the change like it has in the past. It's going to be more a steady increase, more than likely, related to like interest rates coming down, companies keeping a little more inventory, spending on growth, people spending a little bit more money as interest rates come down, and it just steadily inclining as time passes seem to be the big takeaway.
Oh man, I had to hold back my giggles when you're reading that off because not to say that they're wrong or it's not credible, but if you go back literally a year ago, we had an episode with Ken Adamo from DAT, and he was like,
2024.
He basically said like, yeah, he's like everyone thinks it's gonna turn faster than it will. He's like, but I'm telling you, it's not gonna flip until Q4 of 2024, and here we are in Q4 of 2024, and here we are still.
Well, I do want to point out,
in my opinion, as it was previously, but it's just been soft for a very long time.
I want to point out, like, these things take tremendously long times to work themselves out. Like, this was unprecedented in the amount of shutdowns around the globe, government spending around the globe, and reconfiguring of every supply chain almost in the entire globe of companies switching where they bought products to where they were selling them, lanes, suppliers. Like, you basically reconfigured the entire worldwide logistics industry over a short period of time. And then you had a bunch of money coming in to try to smooth that out. And then you got to fight inflation on the other end. So you retracted it. Like that takes a long time to work itself out in a normal cycle. This was an extreme cycle, like to the factor of 10 or 20 or 50 times what we've ever seen in the economy. And that was a national economy. We've never experienced this in the modern day economy where we were globally connected, where we shut everything down and turned it back on. So, I mean, I don't really hold it against people for, anticipating things to come a little sooner than they probably were going to, because there's nothing to compare it to. It's literally, you'd have to go back to like 1913 and like the flu epidemic or what it was. And even then we didn't have a worldwide,
I think, right?
Yeah. And we like didn't have the global economy the way we do now. So like there really isn't even a comparison. So I think we learned a lot. And I think a lot of the ports, especially the West Coast, have made improvements to, help us be more flexible when these things do come up. Hopefully never to that extreme again, but it makes sense.
Have you fallen victim to double brokering, cargo theft, or identity theft? Quickscope stands out as the only load-level fraud protection tool available today. Unlike any other solution on the market, Quickscope is deployed post-agreement between shippers or brokers and carriers. Shippers can rest assured that their cargo remains secure. Brokers can confidently confirm the identity of the individuals on site for pickup, and carriers can trust that they'll receive timely payment. Start your free trial with Quickscope today by visiting them online at quickscope.com. That's QUIKSKOPE.com. Blue Book Services is the resource you need if you're transporting fresh produce or lumber. Their online databases contain thousands of companies throughout the produce and lumber industry supply chains. You can easily search their databases to generate new sales leads. Blue Book's credit ratings help you avoid companies with high credit risk, and their team can help resolve disputed loads. To learn more, go to producebluebook.com or lumberbluebook.com and click Join today. Yeah, I'm going to, I just pulled up national rates from RateView. So I'm going to give you without fuel, because I don't want fuel, because fuel has come down in the last year. So I'll give you like line haul only. So if you go back to October last year, van line haul without fuel was $1.55 a mile. It's $1.63 right now. So not a whole lot of movement there. Reefer, a year ago, $1.86. It's $1.95 now. Flatbed, without fuel again, 185 last year, 196 now. So you've seen, what would you call it? It seems like it was single digit year over year growth, maybe 5% up. So, I mean, it's trending the right way. And if you look at the graph, I mean, they're all going up in that very slow, 2-degree or 1-degree elevation or whatever you want to call it. But it's not going down, and it looks flat, but it's not. It's actually gone up a little bit.
Yes.
When you factor in fuel, it's actually a little bit cheaper in some instances, or actually in all instances, because fuel is just cheaper right now than it was a year ago. So you're looking at like van with fuel, 202 a mile. It was 209 a year ago. Flatbed, 243 a mile. It was 250 a year ago. And reefer, 238 a mile. It was 245 a year ago. So line haul rates are slightly up. Fuel is down, so your net carrier pay is slightly down year over year. So we'll see what happens. Everyone, I mean, here's the thing too, is like, we're a margin-based business. So when rates are up, brokers are happy. And obviously when rates are up, carriers are happy, because a lot of their fixed costs stay fixed naturally. So their margin's going to go way up as well if rates go up. But if rates go up, who's paying the price ultimately? It's the end consumer, right? So there's a happy medium in there. We're just not there right now, right? That's that equilibrium that we talk about when supply and demand meet each other. And I think Kevin Hill's latest brush pass email, I think it was today or yesterday, came out. Still, we have a net exiting of brokerages as well as carriers in the market. So it's going to continue to happen until we meet that equilibrium. So there's your economics of freight for the week. So
Econ 101.
Yeah, let's talk. So anyway, today's main topic. Last week we talked about some lessons learned, and if we were to start all over, what will we do differently? What will we sustain? Kind of wanted to take that conversation and pivot it into leadership management. Basically the role of being a leader within your brokerage, because to kind of set the stage here, day one, if you open a brokerage by yourself, you are literally the owner of the company and the lowest level worker inside that company. And as you build your business out and you grow it, your role and what you're going to do in the trenches versus what kind of leadership and managerial tasks that you'll take on is going to evolve until eventually you're no longer working in the business at all. You're working on the business exclusively, right? And that's how I would argue to say that a successful brokerage owner should eventually get to a point where they're not working in the business at all. They should be able to basically pass off a lot of the tasks and responsibilities to other team members to solely work on the business. Because if you have someone that will never get away from that, that's what you call a micromanager, right? And you kind of restrict your growth potential as a company, and you you don't retain a lot of good talent if you're a micromanager. So that's
Right.
kind
So
of
I want to define
overall.
those too for what you were saying, like what is in the business and what is working on the business. In the business, you're covering loads, you're check calling, you're invoicing your customers, you're going through and splitting
Day-to-day
BOLs,
tasks. Yeah.
rate cons, the stuff that needs to happen, the tasks really that generate the revenue, making the calls, developing relationships to prospects that turn them into customers, having more conversations with your existing customers to get more business, talking with more of your carriers to utilize them on more of your customers' freight, matching the lanes they need with what your customers maybe need, or finding new prospects that have the lanes that your carriers need to be able to get them more of the business they need, right? Building that out day to day is in the business, right?
Yep.
Some on the business tasks, right, are being able to spend the time to look at how your team is operating. Are they operating efficiently? Are there redundancies? Do you have many people trying to do the same things and fighting over them and creating chaos? Do you have too many emails going back and forth about the same topic that are confusing everybody? What does your funding look like? Are you paying too much in factoring? Are you maybe not moving quickly enough and processing your invoices? What are your days to pay as an organization, right? What does the cash flow need? What do your expenses look like? Are you spending too much? Are you not spending enough for some tools? Do you have tools that people aren't using, but you thought they would, right? You need to eliminate those things. Like those are things that you need to get out of the business to be able to look at it and to be able to think through these things, because that's the other thing that I think we really overlook being in it to being working on it. And I'll use myself is when you're very task oriented, you get into that habit. And this is the hardest thing for me to work on when I switch between the two, because I'm doing both in a lot of scenarios, right? I'll jump into a bid. I've got to work something. I got to move a lane. I got to reorganize a schedule for some tankers. But then the next hour, I got to jump out and do high level things. Well, the thing with switching, we talked about this in other episodes, is your brain is not meant to multitask. In fact, like modern now psychology will tell you, like, you literally don't even do that. You think you do it and you convince yourself you're multitasking. But every time you switch tasks, your brain has to, it doesn't start where you left off. It has to go back and get momentum to pick up. So, like, it literally slows you down and makes it harder, creates more effort. You burn more calories and you're more tired. So, like, when you are switching tasks, it's tremendously taxing and it is difficult for anybody. I don't care what everybody tells themselves. That fallacy that lived for like 30 or 40 years is bullshit. And the thing that I've noticed is the habit that is the hardest is like, it's this impulsiveness to constantly be on my email and to be looking for any changes related to my customer, my carrier, or an issue. But then I can't sit still with myself and my thoughts to think through something that is more complex to be working on the business, like the financial side, like going through invoices and really looking at what are we paying in fees here? What are we paying when we do this? Are we using this tool? Like you really need sometimes, it's funny, like my coach tells me this, like you need to block out time sometimes for boredom. Like literally block out like 20 minutes or half an hour, do nothing and just sit there with your thoughts, because that's what initiates creativity. That's how you connect and come up with new thoughts. Like that's really where we create these things. But when you're constantly doing things, you never create the space for your mind to be still and actually come up with some of the solutions or to think through the things that you need to,
That's
which is for
interesting.
me like a big challenge.
I can't. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm not gonna sit around for 20 minutes and do nothing but try to think creatively. But my mind goes there when I'm at the gym. So
Correct.
it could be, hey, I'm on the treadmill or on the elliptical or I'm, doing some, resistance training or weights and whatnot. But that's my mind. My mind will go creative mode there. And what's
I
crazy
do
is
the
like
same thing, by the
I
way.
have to use like I'll have my phone and like I'll have an idea. And I'm like, boom, I got to email myself a note so I'll read it when I get back to my computer, or I'll add a note to my phone. Um, but you're right. Like I try to stay out of my email when I'm there and just listen to music,
Be present.
podcast, whatever, and just get into thought mode.
So here's something interesting, and I wish I could remember this off the top of my head, but like your brain literally creates a chemical that they're now finding out helps you like grow brain cells or creates more neuroplasticity when you're moving. It's not at like super high heart rates, like high impact cardio, but it's like walking or like a jog. And what happens is your your body creates more of this chemical and it actually helps you think better. And that's why they say when you're trying to solve a problem, you shouldn't really just sit still. You should walk And that helps you do those things. That's why, and it's funny, like I didn't realize that, but I do that. I used to do it on my bike all the time. I would take like 2 hour-long bike rides a week or an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just literally stop and use voice notes to remind myself. And I'm like, I get more thoughts in that hour and a half than the entire week because you're just putting
Nice.
yourself in the right state.
That's good. So I want to go back to working on the business, and I'll kind of share something that I'm working on right now, and then we'll kind of talk through the different stages of managerial tasks and leadership and whatnot. So I've been building out a division for Pierce Worldwide for going on 5 years now, and it's been great. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. But one of the things that we didn't do until recently is like really look at the granular level of where are the profitable areas and where are the non-profitable areas. I don't just mean like, oh yeah, look at the gross profit. No, we went as far, and we're working on this now. We're going as far as, let's say we're looking at one branch or one agency. We're looking at, load count, all the normal metrics, right? And then we're taking all of our costs and we're including back office salaries, et cetera, and pro rata figuring out how much is goes to them based off their load count. And then you figure out that net at the end of the day, are they really making you money or are they a headache for you? And that is the kind of stuff that's working on the business versus in the business. But if you can identify that kind of stuff, those are the things that you need to have as a leader and have some kind of thought process behind to be successful long term. Like, I mean, I go through financials every single month as well, right? I want to see at the end of the day, what is my division net the company after everybody's been paid, right? And how does it compare to last month? How about last year? What's different? What's that percentage look like versus the top line? And those are things that if you don't pay attention to, you can really get your company in a bad position and not even notice it.
Correct. And I want to go through that one like really simply for everyone to be able to get some takeaways from that. Because I think for some newer owners, like you brushed through that really quick, and I want to literally kind of deconstruct that. So, okay, so let's just do back office. Say you've got 2 or 3 people doing invoicing, and say you also have a brokerage that works out of an office. Okay, well, those folks are doing invoicing for the people in the office. Say there's 15 people in your office. Okay, now you have an agent division that you started 2 years ago, and you've got 2 or 3 agents. And you're like, well, those agents are just being invoiced by the same 2 or 3 people we had invoicing the office. So like, do you include the cost of paying those people and associate it with the agents? Because again, I think for some business owners, they're like, well, I got to pay them anyway. And they're just doing a little more work. So is the cost for the small agent division associated with the back office that already exists? And I think what I'm hearing you say, what you guys do when you say pro rata, what that really means is you look at a person and break down the percentage of their cost and what they do to allocate it correctly to that small division. So for instance, if you have 2 people that you're paying, just say 50 grand a year, and they invoice 200 loads a week for your office. Okay, break down the 200 divided by what you pay them per week to figure out what it costs to process each invoice. Then you look at how many hours a day they're working to do that work. And then you look at how much it costs to pay those people just to invoice for your agent division. And then you take that number per load to invoice cost and you associate it with just the agent division. So you don't take their whole salary of 100 grand of these 2 people and say, oh, the agent division has to cover all that. They need to cover the hourly cost of paying those 2 people to invoice their work. Now you have a better understanding of the other, which is really a fixed expense associated with the small division. Now you're right, like those people would exist no matter what, but where it starts to come into play if you don't do something like this is when your team in your office grows to 300 loads a week or 400, you're probably going to have to hire more people quicker because the agent is probably going to grow a little too. So you're going to have to hire 2 into 3 into 4 faster. And that's where you need to be able to understand how much each side of your company is using in resources, even if you're paying those people salaries.
In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the country. You'll get real-time rates on every lane so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
Yeah, we broke it down to, we wanted to figure out the cost per load for salaries, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it was like something around $10 a load is basically what it came out to be. But then what you realize is, like, if you have and I won't, I'll just speak generically here. If you have a broker that does 100 loads a week and another one that only does 10 loads a week, well, one of those brokers is using 10x the amount of resources as the other one, right? So you should attribute those expenses accordingly. So if the 100 loads is bringing in, a decent amount of profit, but they're using up 90% of your resources, and your 10 loads a week is way more profitable per load and using less resources, maybe you want to lean into more of that style of business, right? So it's that, again, I'm just kind of spitballing, making this stuff up, but this is the kind of stuff you need to think about as a leader within your company. And you could even like zoom this in and go to a smaller scale. Like if you're an agent and you're growing an agency and you've got sub agents or employees, the same concept applies on the smaller scale. You might be running your own book of business still, but you also still need to be the manager of those within your agency. So if you've got a team of 3 or a team of 4 or 5, don't let these people just do business and be like, oh, they're making money, it's all good. You need to have some sort of system where you're paying attention to the profitability of it. Doesn't matter if you're a team of 3
Correct.
or a team of 100 or a team of 1,000. These same basic principles apply.
Well, and here's an easy way too, I think, for somebody just starting to do this. Take all of your fixed expenses, every bill you have to pay every month that doesn't change. There's your fixed expenses. Add those all up, right? Then divide that number by the number of loads you move that month. Whatever that dollar amount is, that's your fixed cost to move each load. It's what it was last month, right? Then you take all your variable costs and you do the same thing. And then you have a variable cost per load, right? Now you have a dollar amount for your fixed cost per loads and variable cost per loads. Add them together. That's your total cost to move one load, right? And I don't think many brokerage owners even just do the simple aspect of that, because I think they'd be shocked at how many loads they probably move that are even at losses that they think are profits. And I think this is really prevalent in the agency division. And the reason is, in the agency side, an agent is motivated. Like, if you want to know what somebody's going to do, show me their incentives. I'll tell you where they're going to focus. And an agent, they get 70% of every load they move. They don't have fixed costs other than maybe some things, but like they're much lower than when you run a W-2 brokerage. So like you'll see agents that we've brought on that are moving loads for like $50 profits. Because to them, they're like, well, I'm getting 70% of the $50. I'm at least getting $30. I'll move the load. But to the company, they're paying a lot of fixed costs to support that. And like their break even is probably like $55 a load. So it's like, for the company, that's a loss. For an agent, it's a win. And you need to be able to see how these things factor into how you're managing and trying to grow your company, because you could, to your point, grow the wrong side that is actually losing you money, because on the surface, it looks like it's making more, but in reality, it's costing you the most.
So great point. And so I used to work for a company that had a minimum, like you had to have X amount of profit per load. Otherwise commission would be impacted by it. And the reason was, I mean, I just gave you the example of like salary attributed to like cost per load. And I think it was like $10 was the example I gave. That's just salary, right? We're not including insurance, load boards, any other software. But if you do the backwards math on it, let's say your cost per load is $20 total. Well, that's how much you have to retain after you've paid commissions. So
Yes.
depending on how much you're paying your agent, right, you could have a minimum of like, all right, well, if it's 20 and we're paying 70-30 or whatever the case might be, do the backwards math. Now you're like, okay, well, it's more than $50 a load in profit before we break even then. So that's the stuff you have to pay attention to. And, like you mentioned, or we talked about salary, and I didn't want this discussion to be purely financial, but to give you an idea of the stuff that we track, it's, obviously your carrier pays like your biggest line item in your payables, but it's the commission that goes to the agent. It's the salary. It's insurance costs that are associated with these brokers and these agents. It's and I mean like literally the insurance that you're paying as a brokerage, not like health insurance. But I'm talking like your broker liability insurance. I'm just going through my list of things on an income statement here. Auto contingent auto liability, general liability, umbrella policies, claims write-offs, bad debt write-offs. Like these are the things that you need to here you go, meals, right? Like travel expenses that like those all are every penny that is spent in your company needs to be attributed somewhere. So if you have somebody that like is all about in-person meetings and they want to go to conferences, that's great, but those things cost money. And if they're not going to turn a profit for you, like you need to set a limit to that. So again, I didn't want to go too much down a rabbit hole of the finance side, but that is part of working on the business is understanding. At the end of the day, business is just it's a business, right? It's about making money, and I hate to say it that way because it's
Well, if
also
it doesn't make money, it doesn't exist.
yeah,
And let's just look at it simply, right? Like it's not the greed aspect. Like any business can't continue to employ people and pay them so that they can make a living if it's not generating a profit, right? And again, I'm going to get into like crazy economics, but just keep it that simple. Like if it's not generating profits, like at some point it will cease to exist or it will be acquired and those people will lose their jobs.
The only exception to that rule is the federal government because they can apparently operate at a loss consistently every single year. But
correct. But I think that's a really good point and some good takeaways. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about too are like some of the common issues. There's one that is, I think, the biggest reason why owners are never really able to transition out of the business to working on the business. And it is a fear of delegating responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? And I think everybody that has ever moved from producer to manager has probably experienced this to some degree. And as a broker, even hiring your first assistant, you run into this, right? You've
hard.
been doing this.
It's hard.
It's super hard. But why is it hard? It's hard for one reason, because we're scared. We're scared that somebody else is going to make a mistake and that we're going to be held responsible for it. So we keep doing it our way. And then you know what happens? You never get the benefit of the person you hired because they don't get an opportunity to make mistakes and learn. And that's what we're scared of, ironically, but that is how people learn. So you have to allow them to do that. Otherwise, they don't learn. And two, you never free up the time, which was the intention of hiring the person in the first place, right? But I see this more than any other reason why owners can't get out of it and to work in it. And like I see this even in other industries. People that I work with that own insurance agencies, financial agencies that do financial advisory, that do insurance, that do real estate. Like they've just done it this way. They know their customer. They can do it faster. And that's how they justify it in their head. Well, I can do it faster than them. So shouldn't I just do it? But guess what? Now you're in Groundhog Day because you wake up every day just doing the thing because you do it faster. And the person you paid is just sitting there watching you, right? So what are your thoughts and how and what you've seen for people to like overcome this to be able to actually get out of their own way and let the people they've hired help them get more done?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of it comes down to expectation management and having a reality check on what to expect. So,
yes,
when I look at when I hired an assistant, and so I've got two people underneath me that help run our division now. So these are non-brokers, right? Just helping run and manage the 2,000 loads a month or whatever that we're pushing through this division. All the issues, all the questions, all the advice that's needed, strategy stuff. But it was originally just me. So when I hired the first person, I literally dragged my feet for like a year because
I
I like
remember.
wasn't ready. And eventually my boss, the owner of the company, is like, we're doing this. Like this is happening. Which is good. I needed like a little, kick in the ass to, you know, basically give up some responsibility and trusted someone else could help me out. And, if you fast forward, like it's allowed us to grow because I had more time
Yes.
available to work on the business in other ways that I wasn't able to before. But so I guess what ended up working out is when we finally got to this point, we're going to hire somebody. I set very clear expectations up front, with him, with myself, and it was, hey, this first 6 months, it's going to be a learning curve. Like I'm not expecting within 2 weeks to be, for you to be doing everything X, Y, and Z perfect. It's no, you're going to learn. You're going to be learning a lot. You're going to be learning always, but for the first 6 months, expect to have a ton of questions and be very confused. And, don't be afraid to ask me anything. Like anytime there's a learning opportunity, we're going to stop, take a knee, and we're going to talk about it and explain what that issue was and, help you grow and develop. And so that was the expectation I set with him. And internally, my expectation was I'm going to be working a lot the next 6 months, and I'm going to be having less free time to work on the business like I used to. And I'm going to be shifting that focus on developing somebody so that 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, we'll be in a much better spot than we are now. So,
I want to point something out too that you
yes.
said there is I think a lot of people approach that and they think, I'll just tell them what to do and then I'll go do my own thing and then they're going to know how to do it. Like human beings don't learn this way. You don't learn by being told something once and all of a sudden internalizing it and being able to repeat it, right? You've got to do something over and over again until you're good at it and learn it and practice it like everything else in life. And
Yeah.
you need that person to do what you said you just did, which is you've got to sit and spend time with them. And that is the other reason why I think people fail at hiring and delegating is because like they don't allocate the time to spend and sit with a person while they're learning to go through it because they get frustrated and they go, and it's that anxiety that we get kind of as brokers. I think that are good brokers. Like it's like you always feel like you got to do the next thing because time is so valuable. If you don't keep doing more, then you don't grow or you start to shrink. And it becomes such a part of you that it's really hard to slow down to be at a pace where somebody is coming in because they're new. They are moving very slow or not at all. And
Yeah.
you've got to be very patient. And that was something I was horrible at probably 15 years ago. It was why I was a terrible manager when I first started in my late 20s. I had zero patience and I got very frustrated and I thought I could just hire the perfect person to make that go away in myself. And the reality was, just like everything else, the solution was in me, not in the person I was talking to. I had to look at myself and what I wasn't doing, and that was being present, being patient, and working on it. And that's
Yeah.
really what you needed to do. And that's why your guys worked out for you, I would assume.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you fast forward, I mean, it's 2.5 years later since he started. And still to this day, like almost every day, we spend between 30 minutes and an hour on the phone. And some of it's just BSing, but a lot of times it's like we had like this morning, we had an issue and somebody did something that they weren't supposed to do. And I was like, all right, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, well, I just thought you should be aware of it. And I was like, well, that's okay, awesome. But then we went into here's what the issue was, here's how we could have prevented it, here's what we're going to do next, and it was a coaching opportunity. And that's a small example, but there's like big things that happen. Like we've had stolen loads, we've had double brokerage, we've had people try to steal our identity, and everything else in between. And every time there's a coachable moment, if I have the time, I'm going to take as much time as I have possible to help him learn, because otherwise he's just going to be super confused and be like, oh, that's a Nate thing because I have no idea. Right. And I want
Correct.
to make him a force multiplier, an extension of me, not just, oh, Nate has to answer that question.
So the interesting thing that you said there, right, which was, and it's something that comes up in like they call it open door policy in like physical offices, right? It's where the manager says, any question you have, just come and see me, right? And it seems like it comes from a genuine place to help, and it usually does, right? But here's the issue with that. If I have Steven and he's a new hire and I go, Steven, anytime you have a question, come in and just walk in and ask me. Steven is now being trained to literally come to me with anything he doesn't know. All right. But what happens is if I just give him the answer and go, do this, Stephen now starts to establish the habit of every time he doesn't know to come to me, which isn't teaching Stephen or coaching him in being able to make his decisions. In order for me to actually delegate the thing to Stephen, I need him to be able to think through things and make the best decision based on the information available, right? So the open
Problem
door
solving
policy, if you
skills.
will,
Yes.
right. It literally makes somebody stay where they're at, meaning like they rely on you. And why do they rely on you? They rely on you because like they don't want to take the risk. They're so worried they're going to make the wrong decision by not asking you that you're going to be upset with them and they're going to lose their job. So they keep coming back to you, which means you as the manager never get to work on the business. You're stuck in the business, even with the person you hire. What you need to do is what you outlined, which is when you bring somebody on and they come to you with a question, you need to be able to slow down and go, okay. And you have to ask questions, not tell them what to do and say, hey, what are your options here in this situation? What do we know? Make them tell you. Okay, what don't you know? This, and this. What options do we have? Make them list 4 or 5. Okay, out of these 5, what are the worst 2 or 3? Make them eliminate the worst ones. Okay, that leaves you with 2 options left. Which do you think, based on what you know now, is the best decision to make in this circumstance right now? And then you have to support them in their decision and say, hey, make the decision, make the call. This is your decision, not mine. And if it doesn't go the way we hope, like that's okay. I'll have your back and support you. That is what support looks like, not giving them the answer and then yelling at them if it doesn't go the way it should. Because now that person is learning to think on their own, evaluate choices, evaluate options, make decisions. And most importantly, that's where they gain the confidence to make decisions in the first place, is knowing you have their back for them to make decisions on their own, that you will help support them if it doesn't go the way they hope. Because not everything does. Even when you know as much as you can and have experience, shit still doesn't go the way you would hope, even with the best planning.
Yeah, and I think it's to take it a step further as you grow your business, and you will. I mean, hopefully, if you grow it to this extent, you're gonna have multiple levels of leaders, right? You might have sales team leader, you might have a manager, and then you might have directors, or whatever. You're gonna have multiple layers. When you can teach your and train your lowest level team members to be problem solvers, they can become really, really great leaders in the future and help echo that same mentality down. Because here's the reality: there are certain people that may never be a good leader, but they'll be a great doer, right? And that's fine. And there are people that might be um, maybe they're a modest doer, but they can become a great leader because of the way that they operate and that they think. But oftentimes, your best doer isn't going to be your best leader. Like your best sales rep isn't always going to be your best leader. So you might have someone that's just killing it at sales. They're very good at cultivating relationships, but maybe they suck at problem solving, right? And no matter how much you've trained them, there's a limit to how much they're comfortable with trying to think creatively and solve problems. Probably not someone that you want to have in a leadership position. Have you ever run into that where you get the boss tries to promote the top producer as the new team leader and it like
Yeah.
epically fails?
And I think that's probably the most common thing we see in our industry is whoever the top producer is after a couple years, they get rewarded by becoming the manager. And I think that is probably one of the worst things you can do. And I don't say the worst thing you can do is to promote somebody that is successful into a management role. What I'm saying is, if you're only looking at the criteria of closing sales and generating revenue as why they should be manager, I don't think that is the most important piece because most producers are really good at producing because of what we were talking about earlier. Like they're kind of anxious, they're always driven, they're always moving very quickly, and that drive right keeps them moving fast. They're prospecting quicker, they're moving loads, they can negotiate faster. But that personality doesn't usually fit well with somebody that can slow down and be patient and present with somebody that is new. That is a very different skill set. It took me a very long time for me to develop with a lot of practice because I couldn't sit still long enough to be patient enough with somebody when they were at the beginning stage at first. Not when I was
Yeah.
moving at that speed as a broker. I'm like, it's like night and day. It's like driving a race car to sitting on a bus. You're like, wait a minute, you just want to get up and run around. Like it's frustrating.
So I think back to the what I was saying originally with being a problem solver and not necessarily being the top producer. If I go back like 7, 8 years, I was on a team of like 8 people, and so I mean, there was times when I was a top producer, but I wasn't ever like always the number one producer. But I think I did a very good job being coached by my boss on how to help the team overall. And there was a lot of different strategies and things that we looked at outside the box. And everyone, there was always common feedback like, yeah, like Nate is really the reason that we hit our goals this year. You know, not single handedly, but a lot of what he did is the reason that got us um, to that benchmark. So like I said, not necessarily top producer all the time, but if you can create people that become good problem solvers and good thinkers, they can develop into good leaders. And now, now I run a division it's separate at a different company. But I enjoy working on the business a lot more now than in the business as previously done. It is a lot different. It's a lot harder. I think a lot of people think, and I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole here, but I think the difference between being a leader and a doer is people oftentimes think, oh, it's just so you're the leader now. It's so easy. You can just do whatever you want. You don't have to. It's like, no, it's actually like, it's way harder. It's way more rewarding though, if you get the job done right. But it is way harder. You have a way more risk, a lot more at stake, and you are now responsible in some way, shape, or form for the success or failure of the people underneath you. Like they
Yes.
rely on you to lead in a way and to manage in a way that's going to help them be successful and not have it all come crumbling down. So I think it takes a certain mentality, and it is a lot more work because you know you are no longer responsible for just your problems. You are responsible for 100 people's potential problems. So
Correct.
I look at
And it's
I
funny.
look
I
at it right
was
now, like today alone, this morning, outside of the one example I gave earlier, I have uh 2 people that really need my help with customer issues. And I will help them out today with those things, but it's no longer just me and who's my customer. It's everybody. You become an escalation point, and you try to help and coach these people through these situations, but it's a lot of weight you carry. But with that added risk comes added reward. And there's obviously you have like, if you're comped a certain way, there's a financial reward to being in leadership. But for me, it's like the reward of seeing people succeed and seeing them develop and seeing them create a future that they never otherwise would have thought they'd have. So and that is that's the biggest reward in my opinion when it comes to that.
I agree. It's funny. I was thinking about this because I was sick the past couple of days, and it's funny because like I think my daughter or somebody said like, "Oh, well, like if you're the boss, I'm like, can't you just like kind of just take off when you need to?" And it was funny because I thought about it for a second. And I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "That's the irony is because when you're a producer, you have to ask permission to take a day off, but when you take a day off, you are literally just at peace because you know nobody's relying on you, and you go back to work and you just clean up whatever you need to." When everyone else is responsible for you, you have dozens of people, right, in different departments and divisions that have different needs. To your point, those needs don't disappear. If you're sick all day, guess what you have to do tomorrow? 2 days worth of work to catch up with what everybody else needs because everyone's depending on you. And it's funny, it's like once you finally get to the place where you can actually have the freedom to make the choice to either go to work or not go to work, you kind of lose the desire or the ability to because you want to make sure everybody has what they need. And you almost never want to not be at work because you know people are depending on you. And that's where it's like, I get why from the outside. And again, people use examples of like super high paid CEOs of huge companies. They're like, this is ridiculous. They get paid so much. Why are they getting paid so much more than like other people? And it's like, it is a very different kind of stress. When you have somebody that's responsible for thousands of jobs and needs to keep in their head every different division, department, who needs what, making sure everybody's getting what they need so that everybody can still work together, It is tremendously more stressful and very different than when you are producing or doing tasks that you need to get done on a daily basis. And I'm not saying one is worse than the other. I'm just saying they're very, very different. And most people, as they transition upward, sometimes overlook how much different it is, how stressful it is, and how much is actually going to be on your plate.
Yeah, and one of the things to kind of get to the tail end of the discussion here, one of the things I want to point out is um, oftentimes when somebody is young in business, young in brokerage, young in sales, their whole goal is like, oh, I want to be the manager one day. I want to be the boss. Um, I would encourage you to embrace wherever you are in that journey because you will not be a good, successful boss or manager if you don't learn enough things the right way at the right speed along your journey, right? If you try to uh, or I don't know, shortcut your way into leadership, you're going to be an ineffective leader in most cases because you don't have that experience under your belt. You don't have the number of repetitions of dealing with something. And the other thing too is when you become if you get to a leadership position, your journey of learning is not done. It's in fact, it has just
Just
pivoted
starting.
to a whole new
It's a new
level.
journey.
Yeah. My boss is the owner of our company for over 40 years in the business, and he's still to this day, he'll say like, learn something new every day, right? There's always, whether it's a change in the industry or something that we've never experienced before, or just a little niche thing that just never was part of what we've done in the past. You have to embrace that. And I think if you don't, you're limiting yourself. So that's my take on it. I'm a big fan of developing and encouraging people to be groomed into successful leaders down the road. And um, you know, it's hard, but you have to give up some of your duties and pass them off to somebody else to create that next generation of leaders within your company. Otherwise, you're going to stunt your own growth. So that's my take.
Well said. I mean, hell, the reason I got into coaching was because I sucked at this before I got into this. Like, I was absolutely terrible at it. I wasn't very good at managing people or coaching them because, like, I couldn't see their perspectives very well. I was very independent. I'm very good at problem solving my own problems, but I was very poor at understanding the perspective of other people and integrating people together. It was just something I didn't practice a lot. And one of the reasons I got into coaching was it's like, if you want to get better at something, start teaching it, start learning it to your point. Because if you're learning and you're enjoying it, like it should make the journey fun, right? Like, and I've learned a ton in the past 6 years that I've been doing it. And I still get to learn every day. Like, that's one of the reasons why I love doing the show with you. It's like every week there's probably a half a dozen things that I've learned or learned that I wasn't doing well enough or not correct at all. And like, as soon as I stop doing that, like, then I kind of don't want to do that anymore. Like just that whole position, that industry. And it's like, that's one of the reasons why I love this industry is that like, I've never hit a place where I felt like there wasn't something I could benefit from learning or understanding better.
Yep. Good stuff. I'll add in Steven's comments in the chat here. Producer Steven said, always know one level up and one level down of your position. And if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. I love both of
I
those.
love that
So
one.
we, in the Army, they always say, well, this at least is the way I was taught when I was like a junior officer. And I still, as a field grade officer now, I still use this with some of my lieutenants and captains is you should understand, I always say 2 to 3 echelons up and then all the way down. So meaning like if we're at a battalion level, you should understand our brigade and our division, which are the two levels above us. And if you're let's say you're I don't want to use military jargon that people will understand, but if you're a company commander, so you're the boss of the company, you should understand all the way down to the bottom what the lowest level person does. You don't have to be an expert at what they do, but you should understand it. So in brokerage,
Yeah.
right? If you are a sales director, um, I would suggest you understand your boss and your boss's boss, and maybe a caps. Maybe your boss is the owner of the company, whatever. I would go up a couple levels and understand what they do, what they're dealing with, what are their pressures and metrics that they're reported or judged on. And then I would say definitely, like Steven said, no down, one level down, but you should at least I would say understand all the way down, but be
All the
well
way.
versed in at least one down. Yes. Because for example, if you don't understand what your billing team deals with, in your AR team when it's collecting on invoices, and you don't understand the struggles that they're having with customers and, PO numbers being missing or how the billing, they're slow paying. And, if you don't understand that, like you're totally blind in one area, and you don't push your guys to go sell more to a company that's, causing headaches throughout the rest of your organization. So love that. And
I want to add,
smartest in the room, find another room. I love that too. Always be around people that you can learn and develop from.
I wanted to add, I was listening to a recent interview with Elon, and I think he really exemplifies this because in every business he's built, he first learns everything he can from first principle point of view. Not all of the features and everything, but like fundamentally, what does the business do and how does it work all the way up, right? And they asked him, like, what do you think went wrong with Boeing? And he was like, well, like the former CEO of Boeing was an accountant and he knew nothing about airplanes. He's like, that would be like a general of the cavalry that never rode a horse. Like, he doesn't know what the business
Yeah.
is. And it was funny, but it's like so true. Like, one of the things that I think made him so successful in like the biographies you read, like whether it's SpaceX or Tesla, is like he literally learned how to build a rocket. Fundamentally, like, how does this work? What are the physics behind it? What is necessary? What isn't, from like a first principle point of view, right? And again, you don't need to learn every single thing that happens in the company, but you really should understand, if you're leading an organization, what everybody's role is and what the impact they have is. Because otherwise, like, you're not really making informed decisions at all.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that is one of the most important things for leaders.
It's huge. Huge. Well, good discussion, man. We could go on for hours about this stuff, but that'll put a bow on it. So good stuff. We'll see you guys next week on the next episode. Final thoughts, Ben.
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.